Check 1 2, mic check. Check 1 2, mic check. Check 1 2.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative McCalman will introduce the chaplain of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it is my privilege and my honor tonight to introduce you to my father, Pastor Roger McCalman. He's a retired pastor out of Northern California, but he moved here 13 years ago and never looked back, and proud to call Tennessee home. He loves the Lord and instilled within all of us at a young age to grow in God's wisdom and keep us humble. He really did sometimes. But with that being said, again, I am pleased to introduce him to you, and I would love it if you would bow with us in prayer.
Father God, we are so grateful to be in your presence. We thank you, Father God, for being here with us this day. As bills are brought forth, Father God, we thank you that you are our guiding light, you are our strength. We thank you for being the hand over this state, Tennessee, over the great state, Father God, that is a guiding light to this nation as well. Father God, we thank you for our nation. We thank you for the United States and the founding fathers who created such a great place for us to share. We ask you, Father God, to keep your hand upon us and everyone here, Father God. Anoint each family member here. Keep your hand upon them. Keep them safe, Lord. Guide them. Bless them, Lord. For we give you praise in all that you do. We say it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Representative McCallum will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Ms. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 96 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk. Oh, we got one. Let journal reflect that Representatives Powell and Gant are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring who's seeking recognition. Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome our Shelbyville City Mayor, Randy Carroll, here tonight. Randy, please stand up, let us see you. We also have our Shelbyville City Manager, Scott Collins, and some friends from Fayetteville, Michael Wisenut, and his son, Drew. Also, I have two guests with my wife, Mary, Mike, and Beth Davis. They're welcome, you all. Thank you.
Representative Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I have a few guests here tonight. My beautiful wife, Holly, and sister-in-law, Claire, are in the back. But more importantly, three of my favorite people on the planet, my three nieces are up front, Maya, Leah, and Edie. So if you can make them feel welcome.
Representative Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I have some visitors upstairs. One of them you all know, I have my assistant, Robbie Farmers, up there. But most importantly, her daughter and son-in-law, Mike Acuff, their boys, Nolan, Adam, and Taylor. So if we just make them welcome, they're sitting right up there.
Representative Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please join me in welcoming my Red Bank City Commissioner, who is on the floor with us tonight, Jamie Fairbanks Harvey. She is serving her first term on the Red Bank City Commission. So, Jamie, please stand up and let these folks welcome you. And I have a number of Soddy Daisy folks who, if they're not here now, they will be shortly. So welcome to the Soddy Daisy City Manager and City Council members. Thank you.
Representative Martin Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize two of my city mayors in attendance. From Lexington, Tennessee, Mayor Jeff Griggs, and from Trenton, Tennessee, Mayor Tony Burris. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, help me welcome from the city of Loretta, Mayor Steve McMasters and Jesse Turner up here in the upper left corner of the balcony. Thank y'all.
Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I rise today to put behind us the theories of District of Champions and to recognize the District of Champions. McKenzie Lady Rebels won their first back-to-back state championship along with the Westview Chargers. They also won their back-to-back state championships. And with that, I'd like to welcome the mayor of McKenzie, Ryan Griffin. Say hello. Thank you.
Representative Vaughn.
How fortuitous, Mr. Speaker, that you allowed me to rise following that. I must offer a retort to that, but before I do, I want to welcome everybody who are here from the District Champions tonight. My Mayor Stan Joyner, members of the Board of Aldermen, our new City Administrator, Molly Maynor, who's here. She came this year, brand new in the job, and then also town staff, Jennifer Casey. I see Alderman John Worley and Missy Marshall up there, and Alderman Billy Patton was over there. Okay, so good for them. And Representative Leatherwood and I would also, we know that Mayor David Parsons from Bartlett's here with several aldermen, so they're somewhere in the building and I can't see that far. But I digress. Since we're talking about champions, I believe yesterday the #1 team in the country got them a little taste of some champions. The American Athletic Conference champions, University of Memphis State University Tigers, brought one home. So for all of those who are keeping score, and let me say this, before all of you try to claim the title of District of Champions, I just want you all to know, championship children are happy when other children win and get to see what it feels like. So just so I know, I'm proud for all of your teams that happen to luck up and win every now and then, but congratulations.
Well, that's a hard one to follow, but did want to point out Mayor Wisman, Vice Mayor McKee, and Alderman McKee from my hometown, Arlington, over here. And then we do share Bartlett, so I want to welcome them as well. Thank you.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome a couple of folks from Sumner County. Jody Barrett's assistant, Tabitha Gould, has her parents here. They are up in the gallery. David Gould, Becky Gould, her sister Anna Stewart, and her nephew Rowan Stewart. I'm not sure where they are, but if they're here, please say hello and make them welcome. And then I've got one more. Please welcome Pascal Joe Vance, who is a Gallatin City Councilman. He's to my left. Thank you for being here and for your service.
Representative Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Greenville is well represented in the gallery tonight, too. If you can make welcome Mayor Cal Doty, Alderman Tim Teague, and Town Administrator Todd Smith. Glad to have you here, guys.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And speaking of champions, I would like to honor the Bradley County Central High School girls basketball team, which last Saturday won not their first, not their second, not their third or fourth, but their 7th state championship in 4A. And we hope to have them on the floor of the House sometime soon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Helton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome members of the East Ridge City Council and the mayor, Mayor Brian Williams, Council Member David Tyler, Council Member Andy Witt, and our city manager, Scott Miller. Welcome.
Thank you. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of this has already been said, but I just want to welcome on behalf of the Shelby County delegation. We have numerous county commissioners, city council members, mayors, all from Shelby County, and I would just like to welcome them all and thank you for coming up here and visiting us in Nashville.
Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Representative Brock Martin and myself, members, I'd like for each of you to welcome the mayor of Medina, Tennessee, Mayor Vance Coleman, in the balcony to the right. Thank you, sir.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proudly welcoming my daughter and her family to the House today. My daughter in the gallery to my right is Grace Lambert, my son-in-law Dustin Lambert, two of my grandchildren, Zoe Lambert and Jude Lambert, and and last but not least is my oldest grandchild, Nora Lambert, who is serving enthusiastically as one of our pages tonight.
Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Speaker. On behalf of Representative Hicks and myself, we would like to welcome our city manager, Kathy Ball, and our city mayor, Todd Fowler from Johnson City. Thank you.
Representative Brickham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This was a sad weekend for me. I lost a very close friend of mine, Sam DiNicola. Sam was a 40-year employee of the state of Tennessee in the Department of Corrections, and he was a director of our Corrections Academy for, maybe 10, 15 years. So anyway, if we could have a moment for Sam DiNicola, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like for you in the House to help make welcome this evening our mayor from Bolivar, Tennessee, Mayor Julius McTizick. And of course, along with the mayor this evening, we've got his assistant, Miss Carrie Beth Ray. We also have three of his council members, Carolyn Spinks, Melvin Golden, and Suzanne Ray, who's also the vice mayor. And while I'm at it this evening, I'd like for you to also help make welcome the mayor from Brownsville, Mayor Bill Ross, who is from Brownsville. And of course, we want to make welcome also Tanya Sattler, who is a commissioner from East Tennessee, who made friends with the group today. If y'all would help me make them welcome. Thank you.
Representative Holtzclaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we have several members from Elizabethton council members, Michael Simmerly, Daniel Estes, Kim Birchfield, and Bill Carter. Welcome, guys. Thanks for the long trip.
Representative McCalman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In addition to my father who's here, we also have a really good longtime family friend coming in from the Tulsa area in Oklahoma. He figured he'd come out to God's country and see how we do things out here. So please make him feel welcome.
Representative Land.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Benny is watching tonight, everybody, so I wanted to wish Benny a happy birthday once again. Love you, Benny. Just want to surprise you. Thank you.
Representative Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Representative Capley, Representative Warner, and myself, we'd like to welcome Spring Hill Mayor Jim Hageman to the General Assembly. If you just make him feel welcome. Thank you.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, please join me in welcoming my niece and nephews, Jakaya Watts, 7th grade from Chickasaw Middle School. There they are. Jalen Boyce, 7th grade, Chickasaw Middle School, and Tyler Watts, 4th grade at Barrett Chapel School. Make them feel welcome.
Representative Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have a couple announcements. The first one, obviously, with it being Women's History Month, I wanted to recognize one of the women back home, one of the young ladies. Her name is Gloria Hallelujah Woods. We know her as Glorilla. She is a prominent musician who has come up in the last year. She just recently won a Grammy Award for Best Rap Performance. She's most well known for lyrics like Let's Go. You would think she went to school for chiropractic. Please join me in congratulating her on all of her accomplishments. The other announcement that I did have is I also want to say congratulations to Representative Jesse Chisholm on his engagement.
Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to point out that I have one of my boys here, Logan, that is a page tonight, and also to recognize the Livingston Academy Lady Wildcats for their runner-up in the TSSAA championship.
Representative Capley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to welcome Mayor Blake Clay and our new city administrator, Dick McKinley, from the city of Lawrenceburg here today. Y'all give them a warm welcome, please. Mr. Speaker, if I may, we also lost a good man from our community this past week. He was a firefighter for many, many years. Mr. Larry Taylor passed away. If we could all please give him a moment of silence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like everyone to welcome, I got a guest here tonight. It's my 17-year-old son, Parker Mitchell.
Representative Hardaway, were you want to do anything prior? You had your hand up there for a minute at Camper's desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank our delegation chairman for introducing the numerous elected officials from Shelby County. But my own Shelby County Commissioner, Brittany Thornton, is in the house. So I want y'all to give her a special round of applause. That's the hardest working woman in the business.
Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to congratulate the Lady Hawks of Southside High School on an undefeated season and state 3A championship this weekend. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Vital. Representative Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please join me in welcoming the Mayor of Collegedale, Tennessee, Morty Lloyd, and members of the Collegedale City Council. Thank you.
Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since we're recognizing all these leaders, look up here in the top left corner. We have Miss Olivia Culberson, an up-and-coming leader. She's a 4th grade student, and she's so interested in social studies and how we do things that she's been shadowing her father, Mr. Brent Culberson, next to her. So give Miss Olivia a welcome.
Representative Eldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've got a guest up here to my right,
Dalton Shell, he worked on mine and Representative Helton's campaign, our first campaign, and proud to have him here, and please make him feel welcome.
Representative Parkinson at Chairman Faison's desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize Councilwoman Michaelyn Easter Thomas, if you will, stand up. And I think Commissioner Ford is up there too. Is he up there? And Brittany Thornton, y'all give him a round of applause. Thanks for being here.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to welcome one of our Tennessee state historians, Marty Luffman, and his caregiver, Bertie Thomas, and Jenna Amark in the back. And Marty's claim to fame is he was once fired by the former governor, Ray Bland. So y'all give Marty a warm welcome.
Representative Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We must be getting toward the end. It's an honor to have a couple of folks from Unicoi County with us as well. Up to our right, we have Renee Rogers and we have Kathy Bullen. If we could please make them welcome. Thank you so much.
Representative Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I am proud to introduce, if you'll give me a minute, we have Mayor of Covington, Jan Hensley, and also Colonel Jason Fleming with him from Covington. I have the Mayor of Atoka, Barry Aiken, and over here to my right, and I also have Mayor of Brighton, Stephanie Washam. We have Mark Werner, who is the Atoka Town Administrator, and we have Atoka Alderman Christopher Schaefer with us, and we also have Amber Shaw and Mo Eccles. Welcome. We're glad to have you here from Tipton County.
Representative Martin of Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The city of Lakeside is in the heart of District 26, just celebrated its 50th anniversary, and we're proud to have their mayor and the first lady, Mayor David Howe. We're glad to have Commissioner Boddy and then their city manager, Ms. Hertz. Thank you. Well, make them feel welcome.
All right. That was 37 people. Is there a 38th that wants to be recognized? Representative Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was premature earlier, but the folks from Saudi Daisy have come in. I'm going to ask them to stand up. Mayor Steve Everett, Commissioner Keith, Commissioner Penny, and City Manager Bert Johnson. I think also there may be some Red Bank City Commissioners and Mayor in the crowd, and anybody else from District 27 that I have not recognized, please stand up and let's make them welcome. Thank you.
Representative Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I turned 32 years old this weekend, and I had friends travel in to visit me. And so I want to make sure I recognize one, Darnell Wheeler, who's up there at the top. Thank you so much.
All right. Oh. Representative Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to make sure we got to 40. Thank you very much.
You achieved your goal for tonight. Anyone else? Seeing none. Next order, Mr. Clark.
Introduction to resolutions.
Lear Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With it, all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar, referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clark.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Lear Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With it, all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing, allowing that S be placed on the consent calendar, pursuant to rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Lear Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With it, all resolutions line will be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Lear Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With it, House Bills 1,558 be introduced and passed on first consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on first consideration.
Lear Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the Senate bills 212 and 990 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk, pending third consideration of their companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration.
Little Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That House Bills 1,553, 1,555 through 1,557 be passed on second consideration and be held on the desk, referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration, keeping with Rule 50.
Gentlemen, moves passage of the consent calendar, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, item 10, House Joint Resolution 111. Item 11, House Joint Resolution 112. Item 12, House Joint Resolution 113 has been objected to by Chairman Clemens. Item 35, House Bill 758 has been objected to by Chairman Clemens. Item 48, House Bill 1541 has been objected to by Leader Lamberth. Item 49, House Bill 338 has been objected to by Chairman Faison.
All right. Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we are voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Leatherwood aye, Sapiki aye, Rudd aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays, 2 present, not voting.
I received the constitutional majority. I declare consent calendar passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call up first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 74 by Representative Raper and others relative to high school equivalency credentials. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Raper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0255.
Representative Raper moves substitute form Senate Bill 255, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Raper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0255 on third and final consideration.
Representative Raper moves passage of Senate Bill 255 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Ms. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's the same as the Senate amendment, so I move to withdraw.
Without objection, withdrawn. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Raper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, everyone. This is an administration cleanup bill. This would correct all occurrences in TCA that state GED or HiSET. The new terminology is high school equivalency credential. TCA frequently mentions high school equivalency credential incorrectly by using the vendor's products names like GED and HiSET. This is like saying the word Coke instead of soft drink or Kleenex instead for a tissue. The incorrect terminology is used over 50 times in TCA. The credential and not specific test is the appropriate terminology. I'm asking to use high school equivalency credential for the proper usage in TCA. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Raper renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Garrett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I notice this bill opens up several titles under this legislation, more than I've seen in quite a while. I might need to study this, Mr. Speaker. I'm motion to roll this bill to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 111 by Representative Capley relative to solid waste. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Capley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0126.
Representative Capley moves substitute form Senate Bill 126, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Capley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 126 on third and final consideration.
Representative Capley moves passage of Senate Bill 126 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Ag and Natural Resources Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate amendment. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Capley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill establishes that any unpaid solid waste disposal fees payable to a solid waste disposal facility in Wayne County, which has a delinquency extended beyond 30 days, is subject to the same penalty and interest as delinquent property taxes. I renew my motion.
Representative Capley renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 126, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast the vote? Does any member wish to change the vote? Ms. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 126, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 82, by Chairman Boyd and others, relative to workers' compensation. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 263.
Representative Boyd moves substitute and form Senate Bill 263, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 263 on third and final consideration.
Representative Boyd moves passage of Senate Bill 263 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. We're going to move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for an in-depth yet hopefully brief further explanation.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adoption of House Amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Senate Bill 263 is brought to us by the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. It makes various changes to the workers' compensation statute. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Boyd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you just give us a couple of those changes, Representative? Thank you.
Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the bill provides a $20,000 death benefit paid from the Uninsured Employment Fund, which is consistent with the temporary disability benefits and the medical benefits that are currently paid, and they're funded with penalties that are assessed against employers who fail to provide workers' compensation to employees. It also provides that the workers' comp courts will be able to award a 25% penalty to an injured worker if they are unreasonably denied coverage for necessary medical expenses. That allows workers' comp judges to award a maximum of 20% of the recovery to as attorney's fees rather than a mandatory 20%. It clarifies that a copy or a electronic version of a Form C-32 final medical report is admissible as evidence, the same as a wet sign copy would be. And it codifies standard practice of having settlement agreement prepared by either the mediator of a party or their legal representative, and it establishes a voluntary certified physician training program to educate physicians on best practices in treating injured workers and on assigning permanent impairment ratings. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, does your legislation speak to anything about filing claims, work on compensation claims?
Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the process for filing them is the same. It just makes a few tweaks in here, changes the language, and streamlines the process a little bit.
Representative Shaw.
But no major changes in how the filing is done.
Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, I don't think so.
Representative Shaw.
You don't think so? Are you?
Representative Boyd.
Speaker, in my opinion, it does what I just said. It doesn't change the process for the worker. It actually adds, to your point, it adds a $20,000 death benefit that they did not have before, and it doesn't cost the state any money because it's funded through the uninsured fund, as I mentioned. And so I think it's a good bill.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 263 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 80, 13 nays, 3 present, unvoted.
Senate Bill 263 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1429 by Chairman Hicks relative to medical equipment. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 925.
Chairman Hicks moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 925, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 925 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Hicks moves passage of Senate Bill 925 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Senate Bill 925, or what will be known now from now on as Quinley's Law, provides more access to care by removing the requirement that a provider of home medical equipment services that has a principal place of business outside the state from having to maintain an office or place of business within the state of Tennessee in order to gain licensure. And the second thing that it does, it includes oversight from the Health Facilities Commission. I renew my motion.
Chairman Hicks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Bill 925 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts votes, the members change vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, 2 nays, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 925 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reads serious table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 62 by Representative Martin and others relative to special school districts within the Department of Children's Services. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Martin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 244.
Representative Martin moves substitute and form Senate Bill 244, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the passage of Senate Bill 244 on the third and final consideration.
Representative Martin moves passage of Senate Bill 244 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate amendment. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Martin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tonight, I present to you House Bill 62, which is an administrative bill from the Department of Children's Services. This legislation will improve compensation structure for our teachers employed at the DCS at youth detention centers. This change will allow teachers at YDCs to be eligible for pay for performance, state employee bonuses, longevity pay, to put them more in line with other state employees. The 112th General Assembly passed similar legislation last year for the Departments of Corrections. This change will allow us to remain competitive in the market for recruiting teachers and allow us to retain employees. I renew my motion.
Representative Martin renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And sponsor, does this bill in any way limit the compensation or benefits to teachers?
Representative Martin.
Thank you for the question, sir. No, I do not believe so. It starts with the basis for those teachers at that environment.
Chairman Clemens.
In what way does it protect them from limitations or decreases in pay?
Representative Martin.
Thank you, sir. No, sir. It does not decrease any pay for the teachers. It protects them for that.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question was, in what way does it do that?
Representative Martin. Representative Martin.
No, we're good. Thank you, Speaker. And Representative, it doesn't affect the current pay at all outside of making sure that they're up to par. So it's not limiting it or lowering it at all.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lear Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, will the salary be based on the county in which they're serving, or how would you determine the base salary to make it comparable with them, for them?
Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's going to be based upon state employee rate. So we're not going to use it on the local salary. That way they'll have more competitive base pay for that.
Very good. Any further discussion? Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Martin, my desk mate here, and he's also sits right next door to me there in the hall. Could you explain to us what's the special school district looks like there in Gibson County?
Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir. Great question. We have a unique situation where we have several special school districts in our area.
Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How many do we have?
Representative Martin.
I believe 4, sir.
Representative Grills.
That would be 5. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I also understand that you have a chiropractic business there in Huntington. Is that correct?
Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir, I do.
Representative Grills.
If that business was so successful, how come you're up here?
Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am a employee of my wife who runs the show.
Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you say that your wife is a better chiropractor than you are then?
Representative Martin.
Absolutely.
Representative Grills.
Mr. Speaker, I think we all would agree with that. Representative Martin, we love you. Thank you for your good attitude. Thank you for always having a good smile on your face. Welcome.
Any objection to the question? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 244, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Lamberth, aye. Doggett, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 244 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1437 by Representative Mitchell and others relative to state symbols.
Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 1437 on third and final consideration.
Representative Mitchell moves passage. Probably seconded. Ms. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Mitchell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman from Shelby County yield? Davidson County.
Yeah, I'll yield to the gentleman from Chattanooga.
Chairman Faison.
How many years have you been here?
Representative Mitchell.
11.
Chairman Faison.
Was this your first bill?
Representative Mitchell.
No, sir, Representative, but like I told folks in calendar and rules, it's hard to score when you're on defense.
Chairman Faison.
Are you going to tell us about this since you are getting to score as a defensive player?
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be more than happy to. This is naming a state song, the 13th state song that we've named in the state, and it's Copperhead Road by Steve Earle.
Chairman Faison.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind the gentleman from Davidson County that if you bring a song that becomes a state song, that you have to sing the first 3 lines of the song. So before we vote on this bill, do you want me to hum the tune for you, or do you remember it?
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's why I was smart enough to have a co-sponsor, and and the song refers to his county, so you know.
Representative Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objections? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1437, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 93, 4 nays.
House Bill 1437 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 44 by Representative Reedy relative to alcoholic beverages.
Chairman Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 44 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reedy moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 44 authorizes the city of McEwen and Humphreys County and cities in Henry, Benton, Lewis, Granger, and Hardeman counties to hold a local option election to permit the manufacture, receipt, sale, storage, transportation, distribution, and possession of alcoholic beverages within the territorial limits of a city by a majority vote. Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion.
Chairman Reed renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 44 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member vote, as every member wish to change vote. Vital aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 88, 6 nays, 2 present, on voting.
House Bill 44 having received a constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reads serious table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 769 by Chairman Holtzclaw relative to mufflers.
Chairman Holtzclaw, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to refer back, House Bill 769, refer back to Transportation Committee to properly address an amendment.
Without objection, refer back to Transportation Full Committee. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 145 by Chairman Holtzclaw relative to charitable organizations.
Chairman Holtzclaw, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 145 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Holtzclaw moves passage by consecutive. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Holtzclaw, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill comes from the Secretary of State and it extends the period of reduced fees for charitable organizations. I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Holtzclaw renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 145 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member vote, as any member wish to change their vote, vital aye. Hasted aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
House Bill 145 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The most read series tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 613 by Chairman Hawk relative to wineries. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 731.
Chairman Hawk moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 731 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of Senate Bill 731 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Hawk moves passage of Senate Bill 731 on third and final consideration. Bobby second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would allow the alternating use of winery manufacturing and warehousing facilities by more than one winery, pending approval by both the Tennessee ABC and any required federal approvers from the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax Trade Bureau. Essentially, what this does is would allow a smaller winery operation to utilize a larger manufacturer's structure to help grow the winery industry in the state of Tennessee. With that explanation, I renew my motion.
Chairman Hawk renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 731 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 86, 7 nays, 3 present, on voting.
Senate Bill 731 have received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The most read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 577 by Representative Parkinson relative to sentencing of criminal offenders.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 0577 on third and final consideration.
Representative Parkinson moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, a gunshot victim was driven to the hospital in a personally owned vehicle. Once he arrived, the shooter drove up to the hospital behind him and began shooting on the hospital premises. Of course, this situation created a safety concern for hospital staff to the point that the leadership felt it was important to ask for legislative support. This bill creates an enhancement for crimes of aggravated assault and attempted first-degree murder on the grounds of healthcare facilities. In this legislation, healthcare facilities is defined as a hospital. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Parkinson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 577 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Lambert, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
House Bill 577 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 340 by Chairman Sapicki and others relative to education.
Chairman Spicky, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 340 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Spicky moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill, so I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman White moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Spicky, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 340 expands what constitutes a zero tolerance offense to include if a student threatens mass violence on school property or at a school-related activity. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Spicky renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you, what is the punishment under the zero tolerance law?
Chairman Spicky.
Expulsion for 1 year.
Chairman Clemens.
For the entire school year?
Chairman Spicky.
1 calendar year.
Chairman Clemens.
So if a student commits aggravated assault that results in a bodily injury, they'd be suspended expelled for the entire calendar year?
Chairman Spicky.
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Chairman Clemens.
And during that calendar year, where does that student receive their education?
Chairman Spicky.
There is the option that we passed a couple years ago about alternative learning environments.
Chairman Clemens.
And is that mandatory for children or students under a certain age?
Chairman Clemens. Chairman Spicky.
Can you re-ask that question and clarify a little bit better for
Chairman
me?
Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So if under that alternative school, for lack of a better term, does a child have to attend that under this circumstance if they're expelled for a year? If they're under the age of 16 or under age 18, is there any age range where that's mandatory? Or are we allowing children to simply do nothing for an entire year if they happen to commit one of these offenses?
Chairman Spicky.
That'd be at the discretion of the LEA.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Representative, obviously I know what you're trying to get at, but I would have to also try to figure out whether or not it's a good idea to have kids out of school for an entire year. Especially with the numbers growing, with young people in bad behavior, they're still going to come back at some point and have to deal with the community at a disadvantaged area. Now, we could probably make it mandatory that they have to go. I don't think they should have the option. They should go to school. Okay, they're taken away from their friends. They're being punished by that. They don't have the same familiarity, whatever group and activity we're in. They don't have that, so they're getting their punishment. We need to make sure they understand what they did was serious, but they still got to get an education. We need them to get an education. This country needs them to get an education. Now, how does it conflict with the federal law? Because the federal law, I thought by a certain age you have to be in school with the federal law. Does it conflict with that at all?
Chairman speaking.
No, it does not.
Representative Towns.
There's no conflict. So if we can't do it now, I'd love to have your involvement with me to look at it in the future. We got to figure out what we're going to do. We get some data as well and look at the numbers, but we need to make sure these kids are going to school. They should have no say in whether they go or not. It should be mandatory that they go to they attend some school. So I want to get that on the record and like to work with you on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman speaking.
Just a little clarification that might answer your question for you. Zero tolerance offense means an offense committed by a student requiring the student to be expelled from the school for at least one calendar year that can only be modified on a case-by-case basis by the director of schools or the director of a charter school.
Representative Towns.
I understand that, but we tell them what to do. We modified, we're the law, so we can change it. We need to have the long shot, the wisdom, and make sure that the state where this law applies, we're not handicapping these kids on the front end, therefore handicapping our community. So I still would like to work with you. We do something that's going to be more accommodating. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Spicky. Good. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I know in Knox County, we have alternative schools and we also have an online alternative. So my question is, does every LEA have a way to accommodate those kids? Because I do feel that they absolutely need to have school for that year. So is it possible for every LEA in Tennessee to offer a program for those students?
Chairman Spicky.
Yes, during COVID, they had to come up with an alternative learning environment. That was a bill we passed 2 years ago in regards to COVID to make sure children had a way to go home and still be educated. So LEAs right now have the ability to create alternative learning environments.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you. And this bill ensures that the student will get that program or a program in that LEA.
Chairman Spicky.
That would be a local control issue for that local LEA to determine what's best for that student.
Representative Johnson.
Okay, I guess if you're telling me that they exist in every LEA and it will be an option for them, I can support that, but that's what you're telling me, correct?
Chairman Spicky.
You can clarify the question for me.
Representative Johnson.
Every single LEA has a method to educate these kids and the ability to do so. That's what I want to know.
Chairman Spicky.
Yes, that portion of code was not rescinded at all. They still have alternative learning environments available for them right now.
Representative Miller. Pass. I see your hand. I don't see a tie. You have a tie? Is there a tie? Representative Pearson.
That's funny.
It's the rule.
You care so much more about dress than justice.
All right, we're moving on. Next, any more? Any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 340 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Hands were in time. All those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 79, 16 nays.
House Bill 340, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 752 by Chair Lady Littleton, relative to children.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 752 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill creates a Class C misdemeanor punishable by fine only for the first time a foster parent from a kinship placement knowingly allows a child in their home to visit with the child's parent if there was a known current court order prohibiting the child's parent from visiting the child, and increases the violation to a Class B misdemeanor for every subsequent occurrence. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews a motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
I don't appreciate my mic being cut off, Speaker.
Well, I would stay in order then.
But what was out of order?
Ask the question, Representative Pearson.
Okay, I'm just checking because I do want us to be a house of respect and equitability. And obviously, as my colleagues see, that isn't how it feels here. The question that I have is the increase in punishment on this legislation. Can you talk about why you're bringing this bill forward?
Chair Lady Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These children have been removed because they've been abused by their parent, and there's a no contact order for them. So that is why we're bringing this bill. And the first time it's just a fine, but the second time it's moved up to a C misdemeanor.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, and I'm glad I understand the issue that you're seeking to solve. We don't want folks who are abusive or violent toward their children to be seeing their kids against a court order, right? That makes sense. But what is unclear is why we're going from a $50 fine the first time to potentially 6 months in prison for the second offense. Is there not some graduality possible between the first offense, which is only a $50 fine, to the threat of 6 months in prison that you considered?
Chair Lady Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are adults and they know that they're not supposed to be there. And the first time is just a fine. And so the second time they know they're not supposed to be there. So this is the punishment for them.
Representative Pearson.
And have we considered potentially removing those children from that care in the first place if a second offense happens versus putting someone in prison?
Chair Lady Littleton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's fair and I'm going to leave it like it is.
Representative Pearson.
Again, I understand the intention. And I believe to the point that you're making, we need to do all that we can to keep children safe. We need to put more resources into DCS. We need to do more to make sure that our communities are safe and that people who are caregivers are being responsible in the ways that they're being expected to by the state. What is challenging here is there seems to be intermediary opportunities that don't include a $500 fine or imprisonment, where we, folks who are responsible for keeping children safe, could take different actions that would remove the children from an environment where their parents, who might be abusive or other things, might not be able to get to them. And so going from a $50 fine to $500 and a 6-month imprisonment, where do the children go while that caretaker's in prison?
Chair Lady Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the kinship that they are with at the time. And the parents are offered all kind of parenting classes, anger classes. So it's not like the kids are just taken. They're offered classes.
Representative Pearson.
Yeah, I understand that. If someone violates this, as we're about to legislate, right? You with me? The children were put in danger by those who are caring for them. Those folks now face a $500 fine and 6 months in prison. Where do the children go?
Chair Lady Littleton.
I guess they would go back into DCS care and find another kinship.
Representative Pearson.
That's exactly my point. Instead of having this imprisonment and $500 fine, why wouldn't the next step be for them to automatically go to other kinship or be given back to the custody of DCS?
Chair Lady Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This creates a C felony misdemeanor punishable by fine only. For the first time, a foster parent from kinship placement knowingly allows a child in their care to visit with the parent if there was a known current court order prohibiting the child's parent from visiting the child, and increases the violation to a Class B misdemeanor for every subsequent occurrence.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 752 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, 3 nays.
House Bill 752 and received a constitutional majority. Everybody declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 557 by Chair Lady Littleton and others relative to child forensic interviews.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 557 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage. Bobby seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment broadens the admissibility of forensic interview recordings and allows the admissibility of such recordings in juvenile court, requiring the child to be present to testify in the accuracy of the recording in unruly and delinquent proceedings. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of the House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment 1.
Chairman Hosey moves adoption. Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. To adopt the next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Littleton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This proposed legislation will expand the age of admissibility for a forensic interview for children 17 and under, will expand the cases in which a forensic interview may be admitted to severe physical abuse or witness to acts of violence, clarifies that the recording is admissible at any stage of a criminal proceeding, still allows for cross-examination of the child during trial, adds alternative qualifications for forensic viewers may meet in order for recording of any interview conducted by the forensic interviewer to be considered admissible. With that, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 557 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ferguson, aye. Ms. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
House Bill 557 having received constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 540 by Representative Harris and others relative to youth development centers. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Harris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to submit and conform to Senate Bill 0874.
Representative Harris moves to substitute form Senate Bill 874 without objection. So ordered. Representative Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0874 on third and final consideration.
Representative Harris moves passage of Senate Bill 874 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments final.
Representative Harris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 540 will name the education facility on the campus of the John S. Wilder Youth Development Center in West Tennessee, the Barbara Ward Cooper Education Center. When a youth is sent by juvenile court to this facility, they almost in every case attend the center, do well, complete their time in state custody, and finish with a clean record and a fresh start. But when a youth who is also graduating from the facility gets out of state custody and goes to apply for a job and has to complete the employment section of a job application, they will have to list John S. Wilder Youth Development Center on the application, and any hiring manager will know that they attended a juvenile detention center. So for years, this has made it harder for our young people to truly get that second chance. So the legislation before you would change that by renaming the education facility on the campus of the John S. Wilder Development Center, the Barbara Ward Cooper Education Center. Most of us here have had the opportunity to serve with the late Representative Barbara Cooper, who was an educator for decades before retiring from the education system and before serving 11 terms in the legislature. She had a true passion for our youth and for education inside and outside of the classroom. And so we recognize that work and her legacy as a strong advocate for education. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Harris renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thank you so much, Representative Harris, and to this body. Having had the opportunity to get to know Representative Dr. Barbara Cooper and to serve in this District 86, where she led for over 26 years, has been extraordinarily humbling and honoring. Her legacy of one of persistence. At 93, she was still texting and making phone calls and being proximate to people who were poor and marginalized. And she dedicated her life in education, but also to service of our community, lifting up the voices of people who were marginalized and dejected and rejected. And she remained a force for environmental, racial, social justice all throughout her life. And so I'm extraordinarily humbled and honored to have known her, and hope that this House will celebrate that memory and do that legacy moving forward.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 874, vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change your vote? It's a biggie, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays, one present, not voting.
Senate Bill 874 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 359 by Chairman Carringer and others relative to training for members of charter school governing body. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0577.
Representative Carringer moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 577 without objection. So ordered. Representative Carringer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0577 on third and final consideration.
Representative Carringer moves passage of Senate Bill 577 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 0577 is about the charter school governing board members. They undergo an annual training, which is approved by the State Board of Education and certified by the Charter School Center. This bill removes the requirement that the training be certified by the Charter School Center, thereby eliminating any potential appearance of impropriety. So right now, under current law, the Charter Center has gotten into the business since this current law was done. And they are also doing training. So we're just cleaning it up because we think it's inappropriate for them to train and certify. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Carringer renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objections to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 577 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does every member wish to change your vote? Ms. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 89, 3 nays.
Senate Bill 577 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 54 by Chairman Powers and others relative to regulation of financial services. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 238.
Chairman Powers moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 238, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 238 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Powers moves passage of Senate Bill 238 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment's the same as the Senate amendment, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for adoption and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of House Amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last amendment was just a technical correction on there, so I'll go ahead and explain that. But House Bill 54 and Senate Bill 238 is an administration securities update bill. This legislation includes investor opportunities and efficiencies for capital formation and increases investor protection. It also, the security of the citizens' private and personal financial information is enhanced by making examination records confidential. And it also deletes the filing of fee requirements for employee stock option offerings in Tennessee that meet the requirements of Rule 701 of the regulation under the Securities Act of 1933. Legislation also increases the capital that can be raised under the Investment Tennessee exemption from $1 million to $5 million. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Powers renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 238 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 238, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsiders table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 289 by Chairman Russell and others relative to the imposition of the death penalty.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 289 on third and final consideration.
Representative Russell moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 289 will allow a jury to determine whether a defendant's sentence of death must be expedited. A defendant's sentence may be expedited if a jury finds that the offense involved the death of 3 or more victims who the defendant killed using 1 or more deadly weapons. The defendant committed the offense by using 1 or more deadly weapons on the grounds of a public or private elementary, secondary, or post-secondary school, or the defendant committed the offense by killing a first responder who was acting in the course of the first responder's employment at the time of the offense, and the evidence presented at the trial proving the defendant's guilt was incontestable. The sentence must be carried out within 30 business days of the conclusion of any appeal and the exhaustion of all available methods of post-conviction relief. If the Tennessee Department of Corrections is unable to carry out the sentence of death by lethal injection, the electric chair shall be used. I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Russell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. Sponsor, would you yield to a series of questions?
Representative Russell.
Yes, sir.
Representative Pearson.
I'll start with this. I'm against the death penalty entirely because I believe it's discriminatory, it's arcane, and it exacerbates injustices in the legal system. Did you know that 190 people have been exonerated or released from death row since 1973?
Representative Russell.
I did not know that.
Representative Pearson.
Yeah. Did you know about 1,548 people have been executed since 1973?
Representative Russell.
I didn't. I appreciate the information.
Representative Pearson.
And last, 1 out of 8 people who've been executed, right? 1 person for every 1 out of 8 people has been exonerated. The death penalty and the cases where the death penalty is decided is not equitably proportioned in our country and in our communities. Even in the state of Tennessee, as many of you know, which has had some of the most lynchings in our country, we see a disproportionate number of legalized lynchings with the death penalty. There have and there continue to be a number of people who the jury or a judge has decided deserve death, who we learned later were exonerated. I've even had Obie Anthony, who was incarcerated as a teen, be exonerated of the crime 16 years later, and the state had to pay over $8 million in reparation to him. Here's what I'm concerned about, sponsor, is that this legislation removes a separate sentencing hearing. And it tells folks that a jury of 12 has the same knowledge or experience as a judge might during sentencing. Because the jury, as I understand it, would be able to expedite the murder of another person just by filling out a form according to this legislation. Is that correct?
Representative Russell.
But thank you for the question. This right here is for incontestable evidence such as DNA and videotape evidence or anything else that is incontestable in the future.
Representative Pearson.
And who's deciding the incontestability? Are we 99 doing that?
Representative Russell.
That would be a jury of the person's peers.
Representative Pearson.
A part of this legislation that's also kind of interesting is you say the offense has to involve the death of 3 or more victims whom the defendant killed using 1 or more firearms. This is one of the ways that you can get an expedited death penalty from a jury or from a jury of one's peers. Why is it that it has to be death by a firearm versus death by a bat or a hammer or something like that?
Representative Russell.
Thank you for that. My bill don't say firearms. Mine says the offense involved the death of 3 or more victims whom the defendant killed using 1 or more deadly weapons.
Representative Pearson.
And then I'm challenged because you then say or narrow this to being only if those deadly weapons are used on the grounds of public or private, secondary, post-secondary schools. You're narrowing when this jury would be able to then kill someone in an expedited fashion. Why are you the person that should be deciding that instead of judges in the state of Tennessee?
Representative Russell.
So there's 3 different ones. There's the first one dealing with 3 or more victims. The second one dealing just specifically the school property. And the third one dealing with first responders. I'm not deciding it. It's the jury of the person's peers in the court of law.
Representative Pearson.
And you are making this decision through legislation. These barriers, these definitions, these areas in which you might be able to fast forward the legalized lynching of folk is being decided by legislators and not in the judicial branch of government. I do not believe this is fair or just or right. I believe that this is a bad law, and I believe that it is going to perpetuate the harm of a criminal justice system that disparately and disproportionately targets.
Representative Russell.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback, but I'm not the one deciding. This would be the jury, not me. It just gives another option.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question has been called. Any objection? See objection. We're on the board. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye 72, 24 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 289 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Powers aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye 74, 22 nays.
House Bill 289 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 452 by Chairman Russell, relative to persons convicted of a criminal offense.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 452 on third and final consideration.
Representative Russell moves passage. Following second. Mr. Clerk, call for First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment does rewrite the bill. We'll defer to the sponsor for further explanation. We move to adopt.
Chairman Keesling moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 452 requires a prisoner of a county workhouse or jail who is released from custody on work release or otherwise allowed to leave the grounds of the county workhouse or jail for employment or to perform work in the community, whether paid or unpaid, to use an electronic monitoring device at all times when the prisoner is not on the grounds of the county workhouse or jail. Requires an employer of the person utilizing the prisoner for the work to pay the cost of the electronic monitoring device. It exempts sheriffs from this requirement if the prisoner is supervised by an armed law enforcement officer or corrections officer and the prisoner is in direct eyesight. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Russell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How are these individuals currently tracked?
Representative Russell.
So for work release, they have to have the ankle monitors and this comes out of their check. So that will not change. The only difference, like if a nonprofit or another government wants to have the inmates to come do work for them, they would have to provide funds for ankle monitor.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the only thing we're changing here is that the employer of the work release inmate or former inmate has to pay for that monitor.
Representative Russell.
That's correct.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are you concerned that that is going to create a disincentive for possible employers of these work release individuals?
Representative Russell.
So this is more towards nonprofits and governments whenever they go out and pick up trash or whatever, because right now they don't have to have the ankle monitors. But to do that, they would have to pay the ankle monitors to the sheriff's office, but the sheriff's offices does not have to fund them.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my concern there is you got nonprofits, which are generally cash strapped to begin with and have a difficulty in this environment. Now we're causing them to incur other expenses when they're probably trying to do a good deed by providing employment to these individuals. And now we're asking them or mandating that they incur these additional costs. I'm a little concerned it's going to create a disincentive for their participation in this program. I guess my final question to you is you don't have any concerns or about that whatsoever with this legislation?
Representative Russell.
Nobody's came to me and opposing it, so I would have figured they would have if there was a problem.
All right. Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? Previous question. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Faison, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 70, 24 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 452 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Carringer, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 79, 15 nays.
House Bill 452 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1164 by Chairman Russell relative to the Tennessee Highway Patrol.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1164 on third and final consideration.
Representative Russell moves passage. Following second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment also rewrites the bill. We'll defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman
We move to adopt.
Chairman Keesling moves adoption of amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1164 requires the Commissioner of Safety in consultation with the Commissioner of Human Resources to ensure that a minimum of 6 Tennessee Highway Patrol officers are allocated to a county designated as at-risk or distressed county that has a size greater than 600 square miles and a population greater than 20,000 people, but less than 50,000 people. This legislation is intended to help large at-risk and distressed counties have additional law enforcement coverage in an attempt to lower traffic fatalities, promote safety, and assist local law enforcement when needed. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Russell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, there are a lot of what ifs on here. Can you go through briefly on what the occasions might be when those counties would not get the benefit of these extra troopers?
Representative Russell.
I'm not sure that I fully understand the question.
Representative Hardaway.
Need a mic, sir. Light is not showing. All right, so what are the occasions where the counties, these, and I'm going to call them distressed counties in terms of safety, what are the occasions where these counties would not get the benefit of extra troopers?
Representative Russell.
If the commissioner's safety is not required to comply with subsection A as far as giving the troopers, if the commissioner thinks the Department of Safety does not have the funding or vacant positions available to meet the requirements, they're not, have to be there.
Representative Hardaway.
Okay, so it would be a question that would be decided by the commissioner at the commissioner's discretion.
Representative Russell.
The commissioner's safety in consultation with the commissioner of human resources, yes.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. And how many of our 95 counties would fall under this eligibility?
Representative Russell.
That would be 3.
Representative Hardaway.
Those 3 would be?
Representative Russell.
That would be Hardin County, Lawrence County, and Monroe County.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you. And once the counties qualify and the troopers are allotted to those counties, will that be a recurring funding item in the budget? Or could the commissioners take it back?
Representative Russell.
So it's a non-significant physical note, but as I said earlier, the commissioner is not required to comply with a subsection if the Department of Safety does not have the funding or vacant positions available.
Representative Hardaway.
Okay, I'll probably speak with you later. I'm trying to figure out whether once the commitment is made, whether the obligation is there ongoing, which would require recurring funding for those positions. That's what I believe would give those counties the confidence that safety was real and it wasn't something that would come and go, and one year they have the additional troopers, and next year there's some budget concerns, or there's just discretion on the part of the commissioners to use that money or those positions elsewhere, which is not fair to those counties. So I would suggest that perhaps we can revisit that in the future.
Representative Russell.
I agree. I hope that they put the positions there and keep them there, because we're talking about land mass for these counties that are 600 square miles or greater. So these officers are there needed to help patrol the areas. These are economically distressed and at-risk counties. They just can't afford the extra law enforcement officers to cover this large area. So I hope they'll put them there and keep them there.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. And we know that safety is one concern when economic development is at stake, or when these counties are in competition with other states or other areas. Safety is one of the main concerns. Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Russell. All right. Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I remove previous question.
Persuasion be called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1164 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays, one present, not voting.
House Bill 1164 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 5 by Representative Gillespie and others relative to certain offenses against persons.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 005 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment removes the last three sections of the bill relative to sex offender registry. And with that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment 1.
Chairman Holsey moves adoption of Amendment Number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Chairman Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just quickly, what is the intent of this to change these definitions? What are we trying to prohibit or limit?
Representative Gillespie.
I'm sorry, I missed that last. I know
Chairman-
you're standing right there. but I
Chairman
can't hear
Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just, what's the intent of this? What are we trying to prohibit or limit? What's the ultimate impact, practical effect of this going to be?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So what we're doing here is there are several crimes listed in the language of the bill that we are just extending the actual time if you are convicted of those crimes that you would serve in prison.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor, House Bill 5 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 95, one nay.
House Bill 5 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 825 by Representative Gillespie relative to motor scooters. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0976.
Representative Gillespie moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 976, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0976 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves passage of Senate Bill 976 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, what this bill does is we have an organization in Memphis called My City Rides, and it is a lease-to-own motor scooter company that they basically will get you the training, the insurance over a 36-month period, and then you finally own the scooter. And it really does help people get to work, get to their job. Very helpful for people that otherwise are not driving motor vehicles or can't take them at a bus, et cetera. And what this bill does is it reopens an old license in the code that would allow specific training for these motor scooters, which are a lot lighter than motorcycles. The current training that you are required to have is the same training you would have to ride a high-speed bike or a Harley Davidson. And so what this does is simply creating a new class of license to allow that training to take place and make it a little bit easier on these people that already have a tough time getting to and from work. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know we talked about this beforehand, but just to be clear, if someone's license has been revoked for DUI, for driving unsuspended, for vehicular homicide, one, will they be able to obtain one of these licenses? And if they have one, would it still revoke this license if they're convicted of one of those offenses?
Sorry about that. Representative Gillespie.
That's fine. Thank you for that question. It's my understanding that no, that is not the case. That if you are otherwise prohibited from having any type of motor vehicle license, this would not allow you to have this license or any other.
Lou Lambert, got it.
Thank you.
Very good. Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is there a difference between the motor scooter license and that of the motorcycle license? Are we making changes to that?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes. So right now, there's only one type of license for, we'll just call a two-wheeled vehicle. And what this is doing is bringing back an old type of license that used to exist in the code for these lighter motor scooters. And so we are creating, or we're bringing back into an already existing part of the code to allow that.
Representative Doggett.
Thank you. So could someone go through a motor scooter class and yet get a license that would allow them to ride a motorcycle?
Representative Gillespie.
So you're asking me if you get this new license, assuming it's passed, would you be able to drive a motorcycle?
Representative Doggett.
Yes, sir.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you. No, sir. That is, my understanding is those would be two different classes. Just like now, you can't drive a 18-wheeler with the license that I have.
Representative Doggett.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 976, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 89, 3 nays, 2 present, none voting.
Senate Bill 976, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion read serious table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 411 by Representative Johnson of Montgomery relative to alcohol.
Deputy Speaker Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 411 on third and final consideration.
Deputy Speaker Johnson moves passage. Following section, Ms. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. We'll defer to the Speaker for further explanation. Move to adopt.
Chairman Keesling moves adoption of amendment number 1. Probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Deputy Speaker Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 411. This bill brings clarity that only wine and beer should be sold in grocery stores. It clearly defines beer to not include distilled liquor products, and it clarifies the definition of wine, allowing wine-based products to be sold in grocery stores. Wine products above 18% alcohol by volume will not be allowed to be sold in grocery stores. This is the current level in the code. I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy Speaker Johnson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, nope. Oh. Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, why do you need Representative Jernigan up here with you on this tough bill?
Deputy Speaker Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Moral support.
All right. Representative Towns.
Did you say tomorrow's support?
Deputy Speaker Johnson.
Moral support.
All right. Oh, Representative Towns, you had more. All right.
Couldn't find a better man then. You got the best man.
Very good. Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 411 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 82, 2 nays, 10 present, none voting.
House Bill 411 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 187 by Representative Bozo, relative to civil actions.
Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 0187 on third and final consideration.
Representative Bolso moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. Defer to the sponsor for explanation. Move to adopt.
Chairman Farmer moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendment.
Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a bill that fills a gap in the law regarding uninsured motorist coverage and comparative fault. The bill does just one thing. It allows a policyholder to join as a party to a personal injury action arising out of a motor vehicle collision, a responsible party who's been identified by an underinsured or uninsured motorist carrier after the 1-year statute of limitations. And uninsured motorist coverage and comparative fault obviously are abstract legal concepts. So perhaps the best way for me to explain the import of this bill is with an illustration. If a policyholder is seriously injured when you are... Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Bolso renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection? Oh, Representative Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was kind of getting into that. I'd like to go ahead and hear this.
All right, any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Bill 187 as amended, vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? McCallum, aye. Hardaway, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 97, no nays.
House Bill 187 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 183 by Chairman Whitson and others relative to campaign finance. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Whitson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 160.
Chairman Whitson moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 160, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 160 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Whitson moves passage of Senate Bill 160 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this amendment rewrites the bill. I defer to the sponsor for further explanation. I adopt.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption of Amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Whitson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is designed to simplify and clarify certain procedures for the Registry of Election Finance. These are all considered to be procedural changes and are intended to simplify the code and make certain procedures match others currently in use. In many instances, these changes are intended to clearly outline certain existing requirements by statute rather than by rulemaking. The procedures affected by this legislation includes procedures for reporting campaign finance data, treatment and maintenance of campaign funds, addressing sworn complaints, assessment of civil penalties, addressing administrative proceedings, and the annual reports by the registry. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Whitson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? All right, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 160 as amended, vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, nays, one present, not voting.
Senate Bill 160, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to the heel of the regular calendar. Page 1, Item 1, Senate Bill 255 by Representative Raper relative to high school equivalency credentials.
Representative Raper, you're recognized. Representative Raper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm asking to use high school equivalency credential for the proper usage in TCA, and I renew my motion.
Representative Raper renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had an opportunity to look through Representative Raper's bill, and I've never seen at this point so many titles that are opened up this bill, Mr. Speaker. I think it's appropriate at this time to move and roll this bill to Thursday's calendar. I so move.
That's proper motion. Proper second. Any objection? Without objection, roll to Thursday. Call next bill, Mr. Clark.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clark.
Unfinished business.
Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw House Resolution 32 from the committee and the House.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's that time of year when a few bills don't make the calendar for the week. So with that, I move that HB 1265 be heard in Property and Planning Subcommittee this week.
For the motion, any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bill 883 be heard in the Health Committee this week. And I will state, I have checked with the Minority Leader on this and the chairman of the subsequent committees.
All right, you've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bill 1002 be heard in Criminal Justice Subcommittee this week.
For the motion, any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that SJR 11 be heard in Cities and Counties Subcommittee this week.
For the motion, any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the rules be suspended for immediate introduction and consideration of House Resolution number 36.
Mr. Clerk, read the caption.
House Resolution 36 by Leader Lambert, a resolution to approve annual events by certain 501c organizations in accordance with the provisions of Article 11, Section 5 of the Constitution of Tennessee and pursuant to Tennessee nonprofit gaming law.
You've heard the caption. Any objections? Without objection, the rules are suspended. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move adoption of House Resolution number 36.
Leader Lambert moves adoption of House Resolution 36. Properly seconded. Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Resolution 36 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast a vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Capley, aye. Doggett, aye. Slater, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Resolution 36, having received a vote in the affirmative by 2/3 majorities of the members elected to the 103rd General Assembly, I hereby declare it adopted. Without objection, the motion reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would like to announce that our former colleague, former State Representative Kevin Brooks, has joined us on the floor in the black. Please make him welcome.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Wednesday, March the 15th, the Boys and Girls Club will be at the Legislature for After School Day on the Hill. Tomorrow, a pair of these beautiful socks will be delivered to your office, and they are asking you to wear the socks on Wednesday to show your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want everyone to remember that April the 5th, that's Wednesday, April the 5th, will be our Ag Day this year. So y'all make sure to put a little time down that morning on your calendars.
All right. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Tennessee Municipal League, they have, you probably realize, with a lot of local elected officials here, they are holding their legislative conference over the next couple of days. So I just want to make you aware of that. If you see your folks, TML, and your local officials, that's why they're here. So let's just be sure we welcome them. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been asked to remind everyone that tomorrow morning is the prayer breakfast. That's at Lipscomb. Breakfast starts at 6:45 a.m.
Representative Doggett.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just members, a friendly reminder that next week, Criminal Justice Subcommittee will be hearing its final calendar on Tuesday, the 21st. The last day to put these bills on notice would be this Wednesday by 3:30 p.m., the 15th. Have a great evening.
Representative Littleton. Representative Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House and Children and Family Affairs Subcommittee will be hearing a presentation tomorrow from the Joint Task Force on Children's Justice, Sexual Abuse during committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, join the National Conference of State Legislators this Wednesday morning, March the 15th, between 8 and 9 p.m. in Conference Room B for coffee and donuts. Mr. Ben Williams and Ms. Mandy Zoch will be in Nashville this week conducting NCSL's annual state visit and would love to meet every one of you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any further announcements? All right. Roll call.
Roll call.
Chisholm. No. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 97 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Thursday, March 16th, 2023.
Without objection, the House stands recessed till 9 a.m. on Thursday, March 16th, 2023.